We're up to page 111. Paragraph begins with the words V'hi Niksiv. So the Rebbe continues in the Maimer, V'hi Niksiv gam ha'sa'elam nosan belibo. That in the same sense that there is the idea of Yetzias Mitzrayim, that a person leaves Mitzrayim and a person experiences once a year and then more individually every day in the year. So in the same sense, this is also expressed, reflected in the Aveda, that a person serves the Eibishter, Hashem, also in the same way. That a person has in his world, he has the union of Mitzrayim. He has the concept of Mitzrayim, which means limitations. Shekol ish mi Yisrael, every Yid, al yidei avedose, b'chol levavcho, b'chol nafshecho, b'chol meidecha, levatles ha-mitzorim ugvulim. That every Yid, through his Aveda, of service of serving the Eibishter with his heart and with his soul and with his whole utmost, he nullifies the limitations that are within his own world. Because in the same sense that there is limitations in the world, in a spiritual sense and in a physical sense, in the same sense it's also in every person's neshama, in every person's soul, there's also hagbalas, there's limitations, restrictions. The idea of the Bechol Meidecha, that a person reaches the utmost, is higher than his own limitations. And because it is higher than his limitations, therefore, when a person serves the Eibishter with Bechol Meidecha, which means with his utmost, so then he nullifies the limitations that are his own limitations, and thereby also accomplishing that he nullifies the limitations in the world, beginning from the spiritual limitations, which Mitzrayim, the word Mitzrayim means limitation, the contraction of the revelation, of the godly revelation, and in addition to that also and eventually also the physical Mitzrayim. Ukipshutehu, literally, what does this mean? Shal yidei shehu eved asavaya l'mayla metam vodas. When a person serves the Eibishter higher than logic, if a person serves the Eibishter Hashem only with the union of logic, so it is one of his personal character traits, and it's a limitation. It's a certain characteristic in his soul, which is called intelligence. But when one serves Hashem with higher than his understanding, higher than logic, he does not take in consideration the calculations that the world makes for him, and what his neighbors want to force on him. This is a very interesting, unusual expression, especially in a Maimer. Even in Siches, in the Rebbe's talks, we see it. But in a Maimer, to say that we're speaking about the neighbors, speaking about the world, that want to put him into a certain framework of calculation, limitation, restriction. It seems like the Rebbe was speaking here to individual people, because usually when it comes to an unusual expression, it is something that's happening at the time. He also does not take any consideration and disregards what his body says, the calculations of his body and his animal soul, what is pleasant for them and what is not pleasant. He is not interested in that. And even more yet, even more yet, that he doesn't even take in consideration the calculations of his godly soul. Although it's the godly soul, but it's still limitation. It's limitation with seichel, with intellect, with emotions. And here we're speaking about the union of Mesiras Nefesh. As we'll see further, how the Rebbe explains this level of connection to Hashem, Mili v'ashamayim v'imcha lechafatzti baretz. That a Yid says, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your Elam Haba, the world to come, I want you alone. Why is it that he's not interested in all these calculations? Since he realizes and he gets to know that this is relating to the love of Hashem, this is something that relates to love of Hashem, therefore his first immediate reaction is so he does everything for Hashem. All the limitations, all the restrictions, everything falls aside. Because this is by him the most unique and the primary of everything. Top of the list. When a Yid approaches applies the higher the limitations in his connection to Hashem, what does he accomplish then? That Hashem, respectfully also, reflects it back to the Yid. The idea, the concept, the feature that Hashem helps him in his Avodas Hashem, he is receiving assistance and revelation from above, from Hashem, in an infinite way. Because the same way that he gave the infinite, his infinite to Hashem, so Hashem respectively gives it back to him also. Gives him a revelation and assistance to overcome everything, including this gives him the energy to break through the darkness, the double and the quadruple darkness, which is the darkness of Egypt. And it becomes light, as it was by the Jewish nation, Jewish people in Egypt, that it became light for them. That even as they were in Mitzrayim, that it was completely dark. By every Yid there was light, which means that when a Yid connects to the Eibishter on a wavelength which is higher than limitation, so this accomplishes also that Hashem responds and grants the Yid revelations that are higher than limitations. But a Yid needs to remember, and this is a fundamental part of his mission in the world, that he has to make a dwelling place for Hashem in the world. So he can't just connect to Hashem in an infinite light without any limitations, but he has to remember his place is this physical world where Hashem wants that this should be converted into a dwelling place for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
But to take an example from what happened in Mitzrayim, that was a national event that was connected to prophecy, part of our history, as opposed to a Yid sitting in his apartment in Crown Heights who's living in Mesiras Nefesh and starving to death.
Crown Heights is Mesiras Nefesh?
In a sense, this is the idea is that in the same way that there was Cheshach on one side and Yidden had what they had, it's not that the Rebbe is not comparing it in all details. The Rebbe is just saying that this gives the Eibishter gives a Yidden Keach, that he should be able to overcome darkness. And the Rebbe says, what darkness are we referring to? The darkness of Mitzrayim. Which means that in the same sense that there was darkness in Mitzrayim, there's also darkness in the other exiles. And when a Yid reflects to Hashem his Aveda, his service, which is higher than limitations, so Hashem mirrors back the same idea. And this gives a Yid Keach to overcome darkness even to the extent of the extent of darkness which was in Egypt, that you were able to feel it. So it's not that the Rebbe is comparing it with Mitzrayim and here in all the different details. This is already the second part. The Rebbe is only comparing it in the idea, just using it as an example, that when a person reflects his utmost to Hashem, so then Hashem gives back his infinite revelation, and this gives a person a potential to overcome a darkness, even a